Hey everyone, I thought we'd do a little video on herbs. Since I used some in my kitchen today, I thought I'll go over the herbs I've got growing, different things I know about herbs, and so on and so forth. So the first thing that's important to know about herbs is herbs have different companion plantings. So there are some herbs that prefer to grow together and some that prefer not to grow together. I call those the dry and the wet kind. That is why I have a couple different varieties of herbs going. So in my whiskey barrel, this is what I consider my dry herbs. So dry herbs are going to be the things that don't need as much water, that, most of the time grow naturally in the Mediterranean sort of areas where you could throw a seed in some rocks and you'd suddenly have some thyme growing or something like that. So I grow these kind of like herbs together since they all like the sort of same conditions, and that way I don't overwater them or neglect one versus the other. So in the middle of my pot, I've got dill growing. I don't really use dill very often. I pull some off, dehydrate it for later, throw some in some eggs. But mostly I grow this because of this beautiful flower. This is an umbrella-shaped flower, and it is specifically highly sought after by butterflies and other sorts of pollinators. So I should soon have some caterpillars on here of swallowtail butterflies because they just love the dill and the flowers. It's very prolific too, so since I let it flower, and all of these will turn into seeds. Some of this dill is stuff I grew, some came up from last year, so that's another thing I like about dill. I also have my sage in here. I again love to use sage fresh. I love to use it dehydrated. I use sage mostly in the fall. Sage pairs really nicely with like sausage and butternut squash, things like that. Rosemary, I have actually 2 plants in here because rosemary should be perennial. I neglected mine last year, so it did not come back. So I got 2 to make sure I have enough harvest. One thing that's really important about rosemary is not to prune where it's too woody. So I'm trying to find a great example. This stem here is really woody. So you try not to break the actual wood of the stem because it won't regrow. Here's what it looks like when it's really woody. If I were to break it all the way down here, that stem would be done and it wouldn't come back. So since I learned more about how to prune rosemary, I'm more careful about it, so I should treat it better. Oregano is another one of those plants. Sorry, I did just water, so it's a little wet. That's really prolific, definitely benefits from being pruned. So it's better for you to come by, rip off some oregano, because then it will shoot out a couple more shoots. This also gets a little woody, so you do kind of want to avoid those, but it usually handles it much better than rosemary. Again, I love to dehydrate oregano, put it in fresh sauces, any sort of spaghetti or Italian dish, I use a lot of oregano, and it should come back if it overwinters well. I did have some come back last year, but I started a new plant just in case. So most of this is the new plant. I think the other one got shut out. In the front of the pot here, we have, under the dill, 2 different types of thyme. This one is one that I planted last year, and it came back, and I let it flower only because it will bring pollinators and it doesn't really diminish the flavor that much. And this one I don't let flower. And you can see I picked off some of it because I was using that in some cooking today. Thyme is super versatile. I love it fresh. I love it dehydrated. I use it in just about all my soups. And oh my goodness, guys, that is a spotted lanternfly. All right, hold on. There it is. Okay, sorry you had to witness that on camera, but that's what we're supposed to do. Anyway, so I use thyme a whole lot. This year, I also have some tarragon growing. I am very new to tarragon, haven't really grown it very much, so I'm not 100% sure how to use it yet, but my plant looks really healthy, so. I also have some lemon thyme and lemon basil down here. I have these in separate pots because I'm not using them for culinary purposes per se. I'm using them more for the flowers and the smell. The smell of citrus or lemon, that sort of stuff, is kind of a deterrent on bugs like mosquitoes and pesky things. So I grow some lemon scented things around my patio just to keep it a inviting environment. And then moving on to the wet herbs, this is where I plant my parsley, my cilantro, and my basils. Those plants grow really well together because they really love very wet soil, but very well draining soil. They don't want to be sitting in water, but they want to have a lot of water. So right up front here, I've got regular Genovese basil, which actually needs prune. So you should prune your basil back to the nodes, and then new shoots will come out. If I show you here in the middle here, see how there's new buds coming out? If I prune this off, those two leaves will take off and make a new head. So I do need to prune this, but I'm going to do that later and make some pesto at some point. This parsley I started actually a while ago in my arrow garden, and I transplanted it out here and it got huge. It very much loves its spot, and it's definitely spread a whole out. This is curly parsley. I pretty much use it in any recipe that calls for parsley, such as the pot pie I made earlier this week. It wanted Italian parsley. I just used my curly parsley because to me it's pretty similar, and this is prettier. I love the really curly leaves. I always grow some purple basil, which is currently being invaded by the cilantro, just because I think it's pretty. It tastes pretty much exactly the same. Anytime I see yellow leaves like this too, I do come in and I pull those out just to help with the nature of the plant. Anyway, so I do grow purple basil. Doesn't really taste much different, but it's so striking to have that dark purple opal basil sitting amongst all the green. So I really love it, and I do use it in my pestos as well. I did prune the tops of these. I actually used them in some bouquets and it added a nice color. And the other thing I grow is cilantro. Cilantro is not a very heat tolerant plant. It does not love the hot sun or the hot heat. So this area I have it in right now, it gets sun for like 2 parts of the day, the morning sun and then the late evening sun. And that seems to be doing really well because it hasn't bolted that much. But if you are growing cilantro, one of the things you do want to watch out for is bolting cilantro. And let me just show you the difference. So here's cilantro. See how the leaves get more fine? That is a bolted stem. So what I do is I come in and I rip it off, and now I stopped it from flowering. I kind of do that a couple times here and there, and then eventually I go ahead and just let it bolt. I sow new seeds, but as it's bolting, I'll get new coriander seeds that I can use the coriander, or I can just replant the cilantro. That's all I had to show you and talk to you about on herbs. If you have any questions, let me know. And thanks for watching.